Hi, this is Chequelle with Level 21 TV, and you are going to love this interview with Christopher Dennis. Stay tuned.
Hi, so I am Chequelle Brown with the Level 21 magazine, and I have the honor and the privilege of interviewing Mr. Christopher Dennis. Now, he needs no introduction, but I'm going to give a short one. He's done such amazing work in the community. He's been an active leader in the community of Charlotte, in the Queen City, for over 20 years. He does great work as it relates to just making sure that everyone has housing and all of the commercial properties. And we're going to get into a lot of that information. But before we hop into that, now briefly, Mr. Dennis, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful, just working hard. Always, my motto is very simple: rebuilding communities one house and one building at a time. So always looking for ways to impact and rebuild and reshape our communities.
So for more than 20 years, you've done this like effortlessly, especially in the Queen City. Like, there are amazing things. There are a lot of hats that you wear. So let's talk about those for people who are unfamiliar with you. How many hats do you wear?
Man, I wear a lot of hats. But I tell you, the most important hat is the hat I wear for the community. When you look at what we do as a whole, we have a EFIX housing is our housing component, where we actually provide affordable housing, more so workforce housing. And I like to try and be clear when I say that, because workforce housing for me is providing housing for individuals who may not meet the criteria that are working at your front office desk or your admins at the hotels and so forth, trying to provide that gap where people that may not be able to afford the market rent can fit in that space. So we also play in the space of commercial, which you'll see behind us is one of our commercial buildings, is off Basement Road, but is EFIX Development Corp, and that's where we actually do our commercial redevelopment. Well, again, we are building creative spaces in communities that are allowing them to not only provide jobs, access to resources, but built around our core values, which we can talk about a little bit later in the conversation, but doing the same thing of focusing on bringing high quality commercial developments to communities of need. And then third, working more in a nonprofit sector. We have a nonprofit, Community Dream Builders, which provide access to communities to thrive. And so that's more about philanthropic side, and we were able to engage communities on a social level that allows communities to kind of ride and do different things. So it's been a long ride, a lot of opportunities, a lot of challenges, but again, I always tell people I see things in an optimistic way, and I'm always fighting to try and make our communities better.
Wow, so you guys are busy getting things going. Is this something that you guys focus on year round?
Yes. So when we look at some of the things that we do on the housing side, that's always ongoing. I mean, if you look at Charlotte as a whole, there's always a crisis need for housing. Even with the pandemic, we saw an even greater need, and we shifted into a lot of different things to kind of help in that housing arena. But the pandemic, I think, caused a lot of stress and strain across the board, and we were happy to say that we stepped into the challenge. We did some innovative things in housing around COVID. We did a cool project where we actually, because COVID had such a, I call it hot spots, and looking at laundromats. And when you think about low-income communities, a lot of people discount the fact that low-income communities may not have certain things that you're privy to every day. So we did a whole project around laundry rooms. I mean, you wouldn't think that that's some major things, but when you go in low-income areas, you find that those homes don't have laundry rooms. So during COVID, we worked with it. We received a grant, and we worked with some initiatives and partners, and we were able to put laundry rooms in low-income housing. And we tied that to the fact that families were spending more time in the house educating their kids than in a laundry room that was prone to be a hotspot for COVID. So again, always around, daily around, yearly around working on the housing component. Second, with the commercial, I mean, in the last 2 years, we started in commercial 2 years ago, and it has been a everyday 9 to 5, pushing my team even on the weekends to pull off what you see behind us. Again, I tell people living the dream isn't about just being able to have that dream, but also see it come to reality.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned just a few minutes ago. You mentioned about challenges. Now, you talked about how you and your team rose to that occasion, you know, especially with the pandemic, but and got it done, you know, for the community. But what were some of the challenges that you guys kind of faced internally, if you can even answer that?
Wow. Look, you asked that hard question. I'll tell you one, I think the first is just like everyone else. I mean, we're a thriving business, we're growing, we have obstacles like everyone else, and we got hit by the pandemic. You know, some people say you make it look easy, and I do. And I think any leader, you know, always wears the hat that leads the charge, but at the same time, we faced a lot of issues when it came to staffing. We went to a virtual-based staffing. During that time frame also, most people don't know it, we were actually displaced out of our office space at 1801 North Tryon due to a sale of the building. So my staff kind of got split, and we knew that our impact in the community was greater than our current need for office space. So we went virtual, we modified, we strategized, we readjusted ourselves. And then not only having office space needs, we also had some needs come with staffing. I mean, a lot of people couldn't come to work, but our level of service and our commitment to our housing didn't stop. When someone called and said I needed an AC unit fix or a plumbing issue, or they were looking for housing, we made a commitment to provide that housing. We couldn't step back and say we couldn't do it. We did it. And hats off to all the businesses and people and opportunities that are out there. I don't think we were alone. We were the only ones out there doing that. Across the board, I think a lot of people had to adjust their lives, their schedules, and how they got things done. And I'm just happy to say we were able to come through it. And on the commercial side, I mean, this is a true testament. And not jumping too far ahead, but we signed the lease. We put this building under contract and started development. That when COVID, I was watching COVID. Funny, I was watching COVID on the TV screen when we were signing the contract to buy the building, and not knowing how it was going to impact the vision that we had set out to do. And it was a scary time. But I tell people that in the midst of any challenge, there's always opportunity, and you've got to focus on the opportunity. And my opportunity was, how do we build and do something great for the community?
I love that. Like everything about it. I don't even know if I can follow up with that, because you know, you guys, you rolled with the punches, if we can pretty much do it. The pandemic, I know, has affected all of us in many different ways, but to see businesses still standing and still, you know, holding themselves true and accountable to the promise that they made to the community is highly commendable. So hats off to you guys. And speaking of things that I find commendable, you have a nonprofit organization now. I want to make sure I get the name right, but it's Community Dream Builders. Let's talk about that nonprofit, and also let's talk about those, and how we'll talk about how those individuals that want to be a part can be a part of that.
Well, I have to I'll go back a little bit because I want to tie it all together. Community Dream Builders had a unique focus from the mission from the beginning, and that mission was provide access for communities to thrive. And you're like, well, what does that really mean? Well, when Community Dream started, it started out of a community called the Lockwood community, which is downtown Charlotte. It's a thriving community today, and it gets a lot of rave and reviews. But what people don't know was in 2000 and in the year 2000, that neighborhood was labeled as the top 25 most dangerous neighborhood to live in America. Let that sink in for a second. So you look at a community that looked like me. It was a brown and black community, and that community had about 1% Caucasian, but yet it was labeled as the top 25 most dangerous neighborhood to live in America. And that's a scary thought, because the sad thing is, at the time, I was living there. And so I got to see it firsthand. And so when we talk about, and it wasn't just that community, Community Dream Builders was looking at about a broad spectrum of Charlotte-based communities, and our mission is now growing, even is now growing and going international. But the concept was thrive, and that what that meant was what resources, what access, what opportunities do we need to do to allow this community to have the same opportunities as communities that didn't look like it, that didn't have the same makeup as it? How could we provide the same access to these communities or to these situations that would give these communities legs and an opportunity to grow and have the same systemic growth that other communities were seeing? So, for example, we came in a local community in our infancy stages, and we created FIFI, which was a financial empowerment program. We brought financial literacy in. Then we turned around and we did community engagement projects where we simply want to not only bridge the engagement in the Lockwood community, but we wanted to take a model and branch out to other communities that were in the surrounding area. And we did that. And it came to a point where we saw a lot of change and things happening, but we also wanted to see how we could do it bigger. And out of that came the NC Music Factory 5K Rock and Run, which became a nominal fee for 500 people in our first year to run through a predominantly Black community that wasn't prone to running. But we were able to change a narrative that year because the nonprofit, along with that 5K, went back to what I said earlier, a community that was labeled as the top 25 most dangerous neighborhood live in America. This is an actual article. I didn't make that up. That was an actual article printed in the Charlotte Observer. It said that Lockwood was the top 25 most dangerous neighborhood live in America. And when that article came out 1 year later, the 5K that Community Dream was started, we got back to the Music Factory. We asked the crowd two questions. What did you think about the event? Oh, it was an amazing race. What did you think about the community? Oh, it was a great community. We didn't realize that was there. But thank you. You just ran through what they said was the top 25 most dangerous neighborhood to live in America. And now you can't call it that anymore. So the nonprofit, that again, we provide the access that allowed people to change the whole narrative. And that started a whole joke for that community, which kind of went out into not only being an event and opportunities for that community, it actually helped reshape the corridor. And now I think reshaping some of the things that we're doing across the city of Charlotte.
That is amazing. Now we share a common achievement. And this was something I was very proud of when I was doing my research. We're both alumni of Queen's University of Charlotte.
Yes.
So I'm excited. So can you tell me about that? You were able to obtain your MBA from Queen's.
Yeah, I was. And so it was feat. So hats off to you as well. So did you get your MBA? What did you get? Undergrad or?
I got my my MA. I got my Master's of Arts. So I just recently graduated last May with my Master's in Communication from Queens. So that meant a lot to me to see another fellow Queens alumni. So that was just.
So I got my executive MBA from Queens, and so I'm talking. I like to talk to a broad audience because I'm very transparent. So let me just tell you a little bit of my past before I go into Queens. When I came, when I was born, they said I was born with a learning disability. So they said that they put me in a resource class for the first 6 years of my life, and they told my learning ability would never go past 7th grade. And so just imagine a child going through elementary being told that his highest learning ability is going to be 7th grade. And so for me, that was in my default for years. And I'll tell you how that applies to Queens. But before I get there, I worked at Bank of America for 13 years. I ran a trading floor, and most people ask, young kids in the community would always ask me, "What do you do?" It's very hard for me to tell them. I'm the guy that you see running all the technology for a trading floor. You look at the stock market, Wall Street. My job was to run all the technology for Bank of America that fed into the trading floor. And so that kid from resource class was doing that. At the same time, 23 years retired veteran from the military. At one point in my life, I flew in the fastest planes on the planet, and which was the F-16. And so again, when you start to look at the narrative of what someone painted for me, it wasn't their narrative wasn't what they said I was. I never allowed that to become who I never allowed that to shape who I could become. And so when I sat at Queens, I did get my MBA from Queens. I was at Bank of America, and I thank them for their support at the time. And I got my MBA, executive MBA from Queens, and I ended up leaving the bank my second semester of my MBA. But the thing about it was, when I sat in those classes, I always felt as if I wasn't enough, because my colleagues didn't look like me. And you know, it wasn't a challenge, it was an opportunity. But sitting there reflecting back on that resource class, I always tell people success is not about what you gain in life, it's about the people and the path and journey it took you to get there. So my journey came from a resource class. And so when I sat there, one of my professors, he said, I remember he put me aside and said, you know, your achievement is the fact that you are here, is the journey that got you here. And so I want to say to all the listeners that, you know, when you start to think that you're not enough, you're in a place that God put you in for a reason. And Queens reshaped my life. And I'll say the reason that happened was because after Queens, while I was at Queens, before I graduated, I left the bank. So I left my plush salary at the bank to go into my impact, which was a core value of Queens, which was community. So I branched out to drive my impact in the community, because I knew working at the bank, I was making an impact, but I wanted to make a greater impact. And so the opportunity presented itself. And by going to Queens, I met some great leaders who opened some doors, but had some great conversations. And those conversations allowed me to dive deeper into launching and focusing on my business full time. And I tell you, it's been an amazing ride. And I'm thankful for the Queens, and I'm thankful for all the other people who supported me along the way. But it's been a great journey. But how was communications? And did you meet with Dr. Sparks and stuff at Queens?
No, we got a new. There's a new director there. It's Dr. Brown now.
Okay. How'd you like it overall?
Overall, experience was great. I got a lot of great experience from there, like how to network with a lot of people and just how to find my groove in different areas. Honestly, it helped me to maneuver better in areas where the people don't look like me.
And that's I've tried to tell some people, again, I didn't want to come across as I'm not knocking HBCUs, because I support HBCUs 100%. But for me, I needed Queens at the time I needed, because again, he recalls one of my mentors, great friends, and I tell people he's here in Charlotte. So those connections were vital for me, and I think that added to my success. And I think you know it as well.
I think the Zoom was about to cut off, but you have my contact information.
And look at that. All right, cool.
Thank you so much for watching Level 21 TV. Again, I am Chequelle, and I hope that you enjoyed this interview just as much as I did. Make sure you guys catch us on Roku, Amazon Fire, and of course, level21mag.com each and every season.